The sound of silverware clinking against china cut through the room like a gunshot, silencing the fake laughter that filled the dining room. My mother tapped her crystal wine glass, her eyes twinkling with smug satisfaction as she looked over at Vanessa, her perfect golden child. Vanessa's wedding last September was just gorgeous, wasn't it? She announced loudly, making sure the whole table heard before turning to me with that familiar, condescending smile. What about you, Catherine? When are you finally going to settle down? Don't tell me you plan on living all alone forever. Vanessa didn't say a word. She just silently twisted the giant diamond ring on her finger, looking at me with pity, like I was some poor, helpless creature. They thought I would hang my head in shame, that I would deflect and hide like I did every year. But this time, my supply of patience had officially run dry. I set my napkin down on the table, slowly, deliberately, and looked them straight in the eye. I don't need to wait anymore. My voice was ice cold, void of any emotion. I got married 6 months ago, and everyone at this table received an invitation. The air in the room froze instantly. My dad looked up sharply, his carving knife freezing midair over the turkey. He whispered in confusion, "What? We never received anything." That was exactly the moment I was waiting for. I smiled, a smile with zero warmth behind it. I reached into my purse on the floor. Inside wasn't just my phone, but a folder containing the receipts that were about to expose the ugly betrayal of my beloved sister. Before I show you how I absolutely destroyed this perfect dinner, tell me, where are you listening to this story from? And have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Growing up in the Chicago suburbs, I realized early on that my family had a sick obsession with perfection. The family photos in the hallway were always heavily edited. The Christmas cards were coordinated annually, and Mom spun glamorous stories to brag at the country club. But in every picture, Vanessa was the focal point. The sun the whole house revolved around, while I was just a blurry shadow added to make up the numbers. It wasn't just random favoritism. It was a system carefully operated for 20 years. Mom managed Vanessa's life like a priceless art collection on display. Vanessa had private ballet lessons, custom-designed prom dresses, and a hallway full of medals shining like a personal shrine. And me? When I brought home the state science fair trophy or an early college acceptance letter with a full scholarship, Mom just gave a polite smile, the kind she gave the delivery guy, and asked if I could hold the lighting reflector so she could take a picture of Vanessa, because the afternoon sun was perfect for her social media. My dad, with his signature cowardice, was the biggest accomplice in this emotional crime. He never stood up for me. He just buried his head in work and let Mom mold the world to her favorite daughter's liking. I didn't rebel. I didn't scream. I adapted painfully. I learned to become invisible, shrinking myself so I wouldn't take up the golden child's space. I became the fixer, the one who cleaned up after Vanessa's impulsive messes, naively believing that obedience was the price of admission to this family. But I was dead wrong. Submission didn't buy love. It just made my presence cheaper and easier to discard. Moving to Seattle wasn't a teenage rebellion. It was life support. A 3-hour flight and a 2-time zone difference was the minimum safe distance I needed to escape that suffocating atmosphere of fake perfection. I built a new life, small, but entirely mine. An old condo with a big window overlooking the gray bay, filled with stacks of research papers and the smell of roasted coffee. My job as an environmental data analyst was too dry and not flashy enough for Mom to brag about at her tea parties, so she pretended it didn't exist. But to me, that invisibility was freedom. Then Ethan showed up. He saw me in a way my own blood relatives never bothered to try. He didn't see a faded shadow of Vanessa. He saw Catherine. He listened to my silence and remembered the little details I was used to people forgetting. But the biggest culture shock wasn't his love, it was his family. When I first met Helen and Robert, Ethan's parents, I braced myself to be scrutinized, to be evaluated like a showroom item to see if I was worthy. Something my mother always did. But no. Helen hugged me. A real, warm, solid hug. Not a polite social squeeze where they pull away immediately. They asked about my job and actually waited for the answer. They remembered my project names. They didn't need me to perform. They just needed me to be there. It was in that strange, kind normalcy that I realized the brutal truth. I never had a real family. What I left behind were just people I shared DNA with, living in a beautifully decorated house that was rotten to the core. When Ethan proposed on a foggy June morning by the bay, no drones, no live band like Vanessa's royal wedding, I said yes immediately. We chose a tiny, ancient chapel by the sea and only invited people who actually mattered. Simple, real, and completely unscripted. But deep down, the inner child starving for love was still alive, holding on to a stupid, stubborn hope. Maybe this time Mom, Dad, and Vanessa would choose me. I designed the invitations myself, printed them on thick silk paper, and mailed them 2 months in advance. Because I knew my family's habit of accidentally losing things that didn't benefit them, I sent them via certified mail, requiring a signature upon delivery. It was a safety measure, a trap I didn't think I'd actually have to use. I refreshed the tracking page like an obsessive ritual every hour. When the green delivered text appeared, I sighed in relief, waiting for the phone to ring. But the response was silence. Absolute, thick, terrifying silence. No congratulatory calls, no texts. Even the Family iMessage group where I was usually ignored suddenly disappeared from my list. I wasn't just excluded loudly, I was deleted quietly and completely. I tried to fool myself with 100 excuses. The post office made a mistake. They're busy. But when my wedding day passed without a single shadow of a relative, my denial shattered. I stood at the altar, looking at the empty row of seats reserved for the bride's family, and my heart froze over. A cold, sharp thought took root in my mind. Someone deliberately intercepted those letters to ensure I wouldn't exist, and I knew exactly who the gatekeeper was. The silence after the wedding was like a malignant tumor, spreading into every corner of my life. I tried calling, but Mom wouldn't pick up. Texts to Dad got indifferent replies or one-word answers. The family group chat had totally removed me without explanation. One night, while I was washing dishes with hands trembling from suppressed rage, Ethan gently turned off the tap. He didn't ask how I felt or tell me to let it go. He asked one sharp, technical question. Do they ever reply to emails? Check the activity logs. That's when I remembered I still had access to the shared family email, the account used for utility bills that I used to manage. Ethan helped me pull the activity logs, and there, on the computer screen glowing in the dark, the truth appeared clearly like lines of malicious code. My wedding announcement email was opened on April 24th and permanently deleted exactly 30 seconds later, not archived, not ignored, permanently deleted to destroy the evidence. The IP address and device ID pointed straight to the iPad Pro that Vanessa carried around like an extension of her body. But I needed undeniable physical proof. I pulled up the postal tracking receipt for the 4 invitations. I zoomed in on the recipient's signature stored in the system. The signature was curvy and proud, the V elongated showily with a firm underline. It was Vanessa. She didn't just forget. She intercepted them at the door. The motive was clear and cruel. Her wedding of the century was in September. She couldn't accept anyone, especially her invisible little sister, daring to get married in June and stealing even a milligram of the family's attention. This truth didn't make me crazy. It made me cold, a necessary coldness to pull the trigger on the revenge that was coming. Back to the white tablecloth Thanksgiving dinner, the air was now thick as jelly. My mother's sarcastic question still hung in the air, an invisible knife aimed at my self-esteem. All eyes were on me, waiting for the familiar awkwardness, a weak deflection. But this time, I didn't look down at my plate. I looked straight at Vanessa. She sat opposite me, back straight in an expensive cream silk dress, but her hand was gripping the stem of her wine glass so hard her knuckles were white. Vanessa knew. She knew exactly what I was about to say. And terror was creeping through her perfect makeup. That was the only sign I needed to begin. "I don't need to plan a wedding anymore," I repeated, my voice steady, enunciating every word clearly. "Because I'm already married. 6 months ago, on a beautiful day in June. And everyone here received an invitation." The silence in the room wasn't just awkward anymore. It was paralyzing. Mom's jaw dropped, her condescending smile shattering into pieces of pure panic. Dad stared at me like I had grown a second head. Ryan, Vanessa's husband, furrowed his brow, looking at his wife with confusion, as if trying to decode a foreign language he'd never learned. "Catherine," Dad finally spoke, his voice trembling with accusation. "What the hell are you talking about? We never got any invitations. No one in this family knew anything." "I knew you'd say that," I replied softly, a terrifying calm taking over me. "That's why I brought this." I slowly took out my phone and placed it on the polished mahogany table. The screen lit up, reflecting the candlelight like a sword of justice about to fall on the sinner's head. I was ready to burn this fake perfection to the ground. Mom immediately activated her defense mechanism. She waved her hand, her tone shifting to soothing, as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Mail gets lost all the time, Catherine. You can't ruin Thanksgiving and blame your sister just because the post office is incompetent." I didn't argue with her. Arguing with a mother who is blindly protective of her favorite is useless. Instead, I turned the phone toward Ryan, the person sitting closest to me and the most important audience member at this table. "This isn't regular mail," I said, my voice flat, like I was reporting numbers at a board meeting. "This is certified mail, restricted delivery. It requires a direct signature, 4 envelopes sent to this address, delivered successfully at 10:15 a.m. on April 23rd. Ryan squinted at the screen. Dad leaned in, trying to find a loophole in my evidence. But there were no loopholes. I swiped my finger, zooming in on the image of the signature stored on the Postal Service server. It wasn't a nameless scrawl from a delivery driver. It was the proud, curvy V that my parents used to hang on the fridge with pride, the signature that had appeared on dozens of her certificates. "Vanessa." Ryan read the name on the screen out loud, his voice no longer curious but tinged with shock and suspicion. He looked up at his wife. "You signed for these? In April?" That was when we were finalizing our own guest list. Vanessa froze, her face turning pale, contrasting sharply with her wine-red lipstick. She set her glass down so hard that wine sloshed over the rim. I don't remember," she stammered, her shaky voice cracking her perfect shell. "I get dozens of packages. How was I supposed to know which one was hers? I don't open other people's mail." "You didn't need to open it," I cut her off, my eyes sharp. "Because you did something much worse." I swiped the screen again, switching to the second photo, a dry but deadly spreadsheet. "You can lie about paper letters, Vanessa. You can say they got stuck somewhere. But you can't deny a digital footprint." I turned the phone to Ryan again, who was now looking at his wife like she was a stranger. "This is the activity log for the family email account. On April 24th, an email titled, 'Save the Date, Catherine and Ethan' was opened. 30 seconds later, it was deleted. Not moved to trash, permanently deleted." I pointed to the device ID code in the last column. "And this is the device that performed that action," Vanessa's iPhone 15 Pro Max. The same IP address as this house. The room fell into absolute silence. Mom gasped, having no words left to defend her. Ryan slowly put down his fork, the metal clinking harshly. He turned to Vanessa, his voice low, dripping with undisguised disgust. You deleted it? You blocked your sister from inviting our parents to her wedding and let her think they didn't care? Vanessa was shaking, tears starting to flow, her ultimate weapon. You don't understand. Catherine is always like this. She always tries to mess everything up. She turned to me, her mask completely gone, revealing ugly, naked jealousy. Yes, I deleted it. Because you were getting married in June. My wedding was in September. You were going to do it before me to steal all the attention? That was my year, Catherine. You weren't allowed to ruin it. That confession hung in the air, so cruel and selfish that even my mother shuddered. The motive wasn't protection. It wasn't a mistake. It was a cold-blooded elimination just because she didn't want to share the spotlight. Ryan pushed his chair back and stood up, the legs scraping against the floor like a scream. He looked at Vanessa, not with love or admiration, but with raw repulsion. He pulled his arm away when Vanessa tried to grab his sleeve, as if touching her right then would infect him with her toxic selfishness. You erased your sister's existence? Just because you were afraid of sharing attention? Ryan asked, his voice cracking with horror. What kind of person did I marry? Vanessa sobbed, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of a spoiled child who just had her favorite toy taken away. Mom, in a desperate final attempt to patch up the shattering family portrait, rushed to speak. Ryan, don't be so harsh. You know Vanessa was under a lot of pressure from the wedding. She just made a mistake. We're still a family. We can fix this. Fix this? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. How do you plan to fix 6 months of silence? Or the empty chair at my ceremony? You can't fix the past by pretending it never happened. My dad, the man who spent his life hiding from conflict, finally spoke up, his voice weak and shaky. Catherine, we did the best we could. We didn't know. Stop lying. I cut him off, my gaze drilling into him. You didn't do your best. You did your best for Vanessa. For me, you only did the bare minimum so your conscience wouldn't eat you alive. Your silence for the last 6 months wasn't an accident. It was a choice. And today, I'm giving that choice back to you. The naked truth stripped away all the glossy paint of the room. It was no longer a model suburban family, just selfish people huddled in the ruins they created themselves. I stood up. Mom rushed forward, tears in her eyes, her trembling hands trying to grab my sleeve. Catherine, don't go. We can fix this. We're family. I gently brushed her hand away, not roughly, but coldly and decisively. No, Mom, I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. I'm not leaving this family. I'm just done pretending I have one. I walked out the door, leaving behind Vanessa's sobbing, the collapse of a newlywed marriage, and the stunned faces of my parents. The Chicago night wind slapped my face with a chill, but for the first time in my life, I felt warm. I took out my phone, not to check for apology texts, but to perform one final act. Block contact. Mom, Dad, Vanessa. One by one. I didn't block them out of anger. I blocked them for my own peace. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment to the smell of Ethan's coffee filling the room. His parents stopped by, bringing breakfast and tight hugs, hugs that didn't demand anything in return. No one mentioned the tragedy of the night before. We just sat there, eating, laughing about little things. And in that moment, I understood a simple but brutal truth. Family isn't about whose blood you carry. Family are the people who choose to show up in your life, the ones who don't need you to scream to be heard. I used to think silence was a curse, a place where I was forgotten. But now I realize silence is a gift. It's a fortress protecting me from those who are unworthy. If you are screaming in vain for your relatives to notice you, stop. Walk away. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't a scream. It's the sound of a door closing behind you forever. Share your story below and subscribe to the channel. Because silent justice is always the sweetest kind.